on this glorious evening, we enter into the blissful consciousness of our own beloved mighty I Am presence and of the presence of God the One as that glorious presence establishes its God control everywhere throughout the realms of eternal being, and everywhere throughout the realms of coming to be, dipping down as certainly into this physical realm as anywhere else. If it has not yet transpired for you, you may look forward to the time when the veil is lifted and you stand in the immediate presence of your own glorious electronic body and mighty I Am presence, and become fully aware of just how limitless is that presence. And therefore, in that limitless capacity, it is fully fashioned and capable of broadcasting that which it is everywhere, constantly. And then it will rise as a conscious awareness within you, the realization that life becomes a simple process of holding open the door of consciousness from that realm of the electronic body into this outer realm of the physical. Giving that affirmation as Jesus gave it, I am the open door which none can shut. Together with that consciousness comes the realization that it is the authority and the capacity of that presence to radiate and radiate and radiate and radiate and radiate eternally the pristine purity and God perfection which that presence is. And in that outpouring, everything less than that is swept away, displaced. And that perfection is established. No ray is more powerfully able to exert that capacity of your presence to first establish and then maintain or sustain such perfection than the ray, the fourth ray of God's pristine, unsullied, stainless purity of consciousness. No sooner do you enter into the electronic circle brought by the hierarch of purity's ray, beloved Serapis, then you truly do come into that conscious awareness. So much so that if before your four lower bodies were somewhat jumbled up and disordered, resulting in whatever degree of inharmony or imperfection or illness or what have you, as soon as there is that overshadowing by this glorious, glorious attainment which Serapis has, one of the first things that rises like the sun above the horizon of matter in your consciousness is you realize that in God's universe, in God's ordered universe, every part of life, down to the most minuscule or tiniest component or part of that creation, every part must necessarily be where it is supposed to be and must be performing whatever action or service it is intended to perform. And of course, in all of God's consciousness and God's universe, there never arises any possibility of peril, any possibility of a breakdown in the operation of that universe. And therefore, that means for you the slow or more gradual or more swift realignment and orientation of every part of your personal equation here in this world. Not only the atoms and cells of your physical body, your four lower bodies, but likewise every part of life that interacts with you. Every person, every place, every condition, everything, all must restructure and reorganize themselves after the divine, after and according to the divine design. Until you've had this experience sufficiently a number of times for it to be etched in your world as a record that can't be removed, it might sound like so much gibberish to you, or it might sound like an impossibility. But after you have had that experience, which is certainly aided by the presence of the Chohan of the fourth ray, but ultimately, even then, that is done in accordance with the dictates of your own I Am presence. For all the ascended masters work in cooperation with your own I Am presence. This truly is a joyous message. We're going to revel in the blissful state of that message, which is part of the dazzling, dancing, sparkling, effervescent radiance of the light of God in its consummation, when all of the rainbow rays and the five secret rays are all subsumed into this white, dazzling light, which then constitutes the allness of that glorious presence. Everything then is held as it is intended to be by the presence of God. If it is not yet so in your experience, or if, let's say, some of the persons, places, conditions, and things in your life are not yet what you would have them be, or you trust that your presence would have them be, do not ever enter into vacillation or doubt or questioning, human questioning, as to whether or not the law is the law. Rather, simply realize that there is more work to be done on yourself. Because thanks to that injunction that what your mighty I am presence would do on your behalf for your attainment as a Godhead Charioteer, that presence must do not as some hocus pocus miracle, but it must be done according to law through your own individuality if it is to be your attainment. And although it might seem as if it is, there's a saying we have here in the United States, a cop-out, to always throw down the trump card that, well, if it's not working, that's because there is obstruction somewhere within the folds of the four lower bodies. That indeed is the case. And this teaching is something that your master has worked out in the most minute detail for thousands of years. We'll touch upon that in just a few moments. Part of the alchemy of producing God perfection in every part of your life has to do with the physical vehicle, the physical body. Those of you who may have had some study of previous Ascended Master activities or the teachings on Theosophy and other mystery school teachings might have observed that there was a radical new element added to the teachings when beloved Saint Germain brought forth the teachings of the Ascended Masters. Never before that time had there been an emphasis on the acceleration of the physical body. Oh, perhaps fasting was talked about as a spiritual discipline, a moral quality. Perhaps a vegetarian diet, likewise, was advocated, but it was never explained or stressed why these things were more desirable, why they were golden precepts. The fact of the matter is that there has been, over millions of years, of the de-evolution of the sons and daughters of God, a tremendous deceleration not only of the emotional and mental bodies and the memory vehicles, but of the physical form as well. It is slowed down almost to a standstill compared to what it is supposed to be. This is much easier now for all of you to understand now that you have the understanding of the subplanes, the 7 subplanes of each of the bodies. So you understand that in addition to the solid, liquid, and gaseous components of the physical flesh form, there are 4 at least subplanes in the etheric double. And there too, there has been a great etheric congestion, sluggishness, deceleration of that physical vehicle. And in that state, there has not been the physical vehicle for the mighty I Am presence to radiate through into the 3-dimensional world and to enforce on space and on one's surroundings the pristine and absolute perfection of the presence. Always before, the idea had been, well, when your lifetime is over, you just hang up a vacancy sign on the physical body, pack up your inner vehicles, and bid goodbye to that physical body. And yes, it has been shucked off, it has been sloughed off lifetime after lifetime. Now you are coming to realize that the work of the Godhead Charioteer will never be complete until that physical body, as well as the inner thought and feeling world and the records in the memory vehicle, until the physical body is regenerated, reaccelerated, until those forces, life forces that vitalize and knit together the network of the cells and the nervous system and serve as an etheric bridge, bridging between the emotional, the mental, and the higher worlds all the way to the level of the electronic body. All of that must be re-accelerated. Hence the call that you have in your decree books, beloved mighty I Am presence, expand thy light in every cell of my body. And that is intended to mean exactly what it says. The light of the electronic body, breathing forth from every cell, causing each of these cells, nurtured as they are by the threefold unfed flame on the altar of the heart, to re-radiate that self-luminosity of the glorious, mighty I Am presence. Oh, what a magnificent blessing it is when the I Am presence, each one's own electronic body, acting as a literal and veritable sun, a self-sourced, self-activated and energized and self-sustained sun of its own I Amness. Not only does that radiate through those realms of perfection, but glory be, that same electronic body, by divine design, can radiate through memory, mind, feeling, flesh, until it's possible that just like Moses, when he received the Ten Commandments, your face can actually shine with a visibility to the naked eye. Just like Jesus on the Mount of Transfiguration, you can have that self-luminosity radiating forth through every cell of your body. When this is done, it means that the one light of the presence, the one light that is essentially, it is, for all intents and purposes, God consciousness at that level. The subtle nuance between consciousness and spiritual luminosity need not be parsed. It is so close. God consciousness is light, the one light, and the one light is God consciousness. And you realize then something that the Master has been talking about all along that has seemed to be preposterous. In fact, if you have any physicist friends, mathematician friends, you might have tended to be a little bit embarrassed by some of the categorical statements made by beloved Saint Germain on certain subjects, because they seem to fly in the face of the prevailing so-called wisdom of the world as it relates to scientific theories and presumed facts. For example, in one place, Saint Germain says that some scientists have taught or described how planets in space might collide with one another, and that these things are a form of accident. They are a form of something that is randomness, a concept which, if I'm not mistaken, was originated or formalized by our old friend who sits in the corner with a dunce cap, going by the name of Aristotle, who taught that there was that there is a certain mathematical randomness to reality that accounts for something that are known as accidents. And accidents happen just because there is this randomness mathematically. To the mortal consciousness on this earth that has been soaked in limitation and soaked in, and just now is climbing out of the Stone Ages and the Dark Ages, certainly there are mathematical principles that have to do with probabilities and so forth. But these are, if you think about it a little bit, the probabilities, the curve of those probabilities, the mathematical bell curve of those probabilities, is more like necessities than it is so-called probabilities or possibilities. And that whole curve in itself, the behavior in that way, is part of the order in the universe. When you are lifted into the consciousness of your mighty I Am presence, there comes with that consciousness the awareness of the all-pervading oneness of every part of life. A oneness that is omnipresent and a oneness that exerts itself as an omnipotence and an omniscience. And you are aware, as Saint Germain has pointed out, that this one presence of God in reality is incapable of, nor does it set up anything that is antagonistic or in opposition to itself. I guess theoretically, the introduction of a devil is another invention of the human consciousness to explain something that would be in perpetual antagonism to the presence of God. But that is not a part of the order that exists in the cosmos. That order is established and is pervasive thanks to the one light of the one presence. And that, of course, is the purity of this crystalline white fire of that presence. And when you are raised into the embrace of that, it will dawn upon you that light is the instrument, not of accident, but of law. Light is the instrument, and the operation of that light in the execution of that oneness is what we sometimes refer to as necessity. In God's realms, things are necessarily what they are because God has exerted them in that way. Now, this is not kismet. It is not a sense that, okay, whatever happens out here in this world, by definition, it has to be what God has determined as his will. It's not a form of rigid Calvinistic predestination that argues after the fact that whatever happens, God knew was going to happen and God ensured that it would happen. This world has stacked upon it at the present time, starting with the higher subplanes of the mental plane, in the memory realm, in the mental realm, in the emotional realm. It has a whole system, a whole weight of discord, of chaos, of imperfection that is pressing down upon nature and pressing down upon the consciousness of the mankind of Earth. It, at sea level, pummels the feeling world of every life stream who does not take advantage of their tube of light, and works itself out through nature in the many apparent tragic catastrophes, natural catastrophes, and all of the discords that erupt between nations and peoples and family members and so forth. All of those things are actually likewise the outpicturing of this self-same necessity of law because of the erroneous causes that were set in motion. So, really and truly, the things that happen in the consciousness of the Godhead have their grand scheme as a part of the divine design. One of the aspects of this really can only be appreciated when you share the consciousness of the mighty I Am presence, or are lent that ascended master consciousness by one of the ascended masters. And that is the needle ray action of directing intelligence of the mind of God at work. For everything that has spun forth into this universe has come forth as a result of the conscious cosmic Christ command of one or more individualizations of the Godhead, mighty I Am presences, that has given that conscious cosmic Christ command. And lo and behold, the basic essences and substances and matters of the great sea have their own innate intelligence. And they answer the call of that intelligent direction, that directing intelligence, as it is so often understood. So, this is one of the greatest blessings that can ever come to you in the unascended state, is the vision and the realization of the beloved cosmic law that is operating through the cosmos, and how this law is universal. You will then realize that there is nothing so that the ascended masters are not a special case. No matter how august, transcendent any of them might be, and indeed they are not intrinsically cut out of a different cloth than your I Am presence, and thus than you and your heart flame. And when you know the cosmic law, as you are able to set it in motion by the calls and the cooperation with your mighty I Am presence, the cosmic law operates as perfectly in your case as it does for any one or other of the ascended masters. That is not a question of a leap of faith into the void. It should be a question of certitude. It should be a question of conviction, of knowledge, divine knowledge, where you have registered this action of the cosmic law. And once you have registered it, it settles that issue for you once and for all. And thereafter, the outpouring of the veritable sun of your own electronic body radiates the law of its being as an individualization of the one and the good, radiates that forth. And wherever that goes, as Saint Germain says, it's Proclus, all lesser states bow before the immediate presence of the individualizations of the Godhead. Believe it or not, this has a great deal to do with the fourth ray of purity and perfection. Here is one of the ways in which Saint Germain stresses this point. The outer consciousness of the entire human race has drifted into its present claustrophobic and limited consciousness of assuming that that outer consciousness did not possess the desired qualities that it wished. And of course, that assumption produces the result of that assumption. Even amongst the students, the thought sometimes flickers across their world, well, I have been calling for this. I have been holding this ideal for a certain segment of time, but thus far it has not appeared. It hasn't manifested. Therefore, the principle of the application does not work. At least it doesn't work for me. It may always work for Jesus, it may always work for mighty victory, but not for me. This flicker of doubt and human questioning is proof positive that somewhere still within that one's consciousness lurks doubt. No matter what appears on the outer surface appearance world, if you will sustain with firm determination and claim whatever might be the divine quality, the divine condition, or the things you require for use, go right on claiming them with that confident, firm determination, and they will find expression just as certainly as you apply this principle. However, I cannot urge you too strongly to keep the guard for the outer self. Once you have attempted something a few hours, days, months, and it seems not to have appeared, the outer begins to ruminate within itself. It's no use. If it were going to have acted, it would have done so by now. And here is where he gets to the God consciousness of the presence. Such a thing as failure is impossible when you have set the power of the I am, God in you, into action, when you have released that power to accomplish a given purpose, if you hold unwaveringly to it. Countless times I have seen students nearing wonderful achievements and victories and freedoms. And this sense of it has yet manifested would rush in, fixate their attention, that it would retard their progress or shut the door to that progress indefinitely. And here is this realization that comes to you when you are lifted into the purity of the consciousness of the Godhead. When the I am power and the presence have been once set into motion, that light can no more fail in its accomplishment than for the entire universe to stop its activity. For the mighty I am presence to ever, in even one instance, fail in its accomplishment would mean that the universe would be instantly thrown into utter chaos. That is the consciousness of certainty and of the power of the I am to accomplish all things. The light simply cannot fail unless the outer obstructs the approach of that light. And along with that comes the realization that this action of the law applies down to the most minute level. The tiniest part of reality, call it an electron if you will, call it an anu, the tiniest part of reality or any part of creation, everything is under the exact and precise operation of the law. And it is especially one of the great services of the fourth ray, to be the instrument whereby this God control of every part of life is enforced upon all of life. That is part of the consciousness of God purity. Think about purity when it comes to, for example, your garments. What happens when your garments need laundering is that there are particles that have adhered to those garments that don't belong there. They're not in their proper place. But the purity of the law would say, now everything must be where it is supposed to be. So purity restores that. Purity resurrects that. If something happens to be lacking or missing, it means that part of that substance isn't where it is supposed to be. And so the purity of the law will put it where it needs to be. This is really the full sense that is captured in our fiat, that invokes the shield of Elohim, that invokes the Pharos of hierarchy, that invokes the entire spirit of the Brotherhood of Light. It is the consciousness that the light of God never, never, never fails in a single instance where that light goes forth. It never fails. It cannot fail. And that the mighty I Am presence is that very light of God. Surely there have been times in everyone's life when it seems that everything is in a jumble, that things are chaotic, that things are disordered. In your mighty I Am presence, you have the wherewithal to invoke that presence into action and to trigger the release of numberless rays of that presence to go forth. So many individual rays that they aren't even necessarily always discernible as separate rays, but rather it is a veritable outpouring of an effulgence, a solar fire and a solar wind that goes out. And it is your opportunity to send that forth into all of these outer worlds, understanding that you are reordering your world. You have the authority over your world. And your presence, with its limitless intelligence, can separate out your world. You may not have the ability to say, in fact, you should not even ever attempt to compel something to happen in even one other person's world. Even if you decide that you know better for them what they should have, that would be a grave error. But as far as it relates to your world, you are at liberty to trigger the avalanche of the white fire of your God presence, to go forth and to set that action going into every person, place, condition, or thing. The Ascended Masters understand that there are many responsibilities, many conundrums, many burdens, many situations that may confront you in your life, and you're not clear on what you should do about them. And sometimes it seems as if you should take the reins in your own hands and force something through by dint of mere willpower alone. That it will be such a comfort to you when you come into this realization that right above you is this glorious celestial electronic body temple within which abides your true identity and selfhood, and that the whole of that presence realm is perfection and purity and order, and that you can liberate that presence just like that light from the Pharos. You can liberate that beacon light to radiate out that orderliness and be content to turn over to your own I Am presence in answer to your call, the authority for that presence to reorder every part of your life, which that presence will absolutely do in the fullness of time. Part of that reordering will be the restitution and the reacceleration of your 4 lower bodies, returning them back up to those high humming pitches of harmony and swiftness of frequency with which they were originally endowed. Those accelerations are the work of at least 1 or more embodiments. One of the masters alluded to this recently. It is the chief assignment that you have, working on the reacceleration of your own vehicles, including the physical body and the etheric body of the etheric subplanes. All of those can and must be raised up by the mighty I Am presence. And by doing that, you provide the environment that your mighty I Am presence and the ascended masters, the angelic hosts and the elementals, that all of God in all of these various expressions require in order to complete the work of that plan which you are to bring about. Until you have experienced that perfect disengaging or perfect disconnect from the emotional and the psychic world, you are going to experience, not consciously because it has become such a constant droning that you have ceased to even detect it, the pressure of that mass consciousness. But when this purity of the presence presses out through the tube of light, presses out through the electronic circle, presses out through the self-luminosity and the reacceleration of each of your four lower bodies in turn. That creates a purity of consciousness. That means, amongst other things, that that you are like the electronic body in the great central sun, in the sense that you are part of that unparticipated primal essence of that presence. And there is no figure-8 backwash of imperfection and impurity and chaos that enters your world to weigh you down. So you will have that perfect threefold activity of the pure white light that encircles your life, enabling you even here and now to have a foretaste of the pristine and absolutely immaculate purity of consciousness that is native to your own I am presence and Christ presence, that is native to your own heart flame. As Master Moria pointed out, when you have tasted of that Olympian, sterling, Akashic light and purity, you will be ruined for all lesser states of consciousness. And you will want to stay in that state for all time and all eternity. One of the glorious byproducts, in a sense, to just invoking that God consciousness of the white ray, is that because God is present everywhere round about you, because the light of God that is present around you is operating with such precision, such that it never fails, where that light is present, no lesser mortal state can encroach. So there is a natural protection that accrues when that is established. There is no shadow of turning. There is no polluting the stream of consciousness. There can be really and truly no peril, no slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, if you will, that can encroach upon this solar wind that is constantly moving forth through your world. Perhaps you've been someone who has reveled in a certain messiness to life. I know that the world prides itself in being imperfect, in how the grittier things are, the grimier they are, the more real they are, and the more meritorious they are. What a sophistry that is. It is a case of where people who don't think that there is anything other than that, and that that is the soaked in, dyed in the wool, intrinsic nature to their being, they have no choice, really, if they're going to live with themselves, but to make something distasteful into something prideful. And so they'll beat their chests and be very much trumpeting how wonderful it is, how imperfect things are. But I tell you, when you allow for this law, cosmic law, to operate through every part of life in your world, it means that all of the wrinkles of illness will be ironed out of your vehicles. All of the blots that result in poverty of consciousness, that result in limitation, that result in the encroachment, that have a sense of going down the drain, the so-called downward spiral, the sense of the walls closing in, all of that nonsense is banished away into non-existence, because truly it does not exist. Were it not for the fact that there is the God individualization of your own mighty I Am presence as the truth of your identity, it would be a fool's errand to affirm this. It would be tweaking the devil's tail, if you will, to try to hold to these momentums. But there is that glorious presence. There is that magnificent mighty I Am presence, and it is an outpouring of all good qualities. And its whole reason for being is to radiate those essences and powers and divine designs which it is, and to make life richer in every possible way, more to expand and unfold the qualities of perfection and divine purity that are the inherent nature of that glorious God presence. So the mankind of earth and the students of the light especially are indebted that throughout the millennia there have been those glorious Chohans of the hierarchy who have known and loved these various expressions of the Godhead, such as the fourth ray of purity and absolute God perfection, and have kept that anchored in the physical world where it is needed the most, kept it alive in the world. You know, there's a lot of speculation about what happened to the Ark of the Covenant. You don't have to worry about what happens to the ascension flame. It is fed and guarded and loved and maintained anchored in this outer world by, in this case, beloved Serapis. You don't have to worry about the qualities of purity, for beings such as the goddess of purity and even our own beloved goddess of light and so many others are devotees. They are vestal virgins at the altar of God purity and perfection, forever in service of those flames. They have loved those flames so much that they know themselves as that consciousness of purity, of the limitless, dazzling light, the pristine, immaculate nature of the Godhead. Such too is inherent within your mighty I Am presence. And it is there, bursting forth forever in its own realm of the great central sun, pouring forth through the causal body, keeping your causal body anchored in the Akashic or nirvanic world, dipping down into the Buddhic world and holding there the perfect patterns of divine order and perfection in the golden chain, the golden river, and the Buddhic web. And likewise, your own God presence is pulsing love, wisdom, power, white fire core purity, love, wisdom, power, purity, every moment pulsing forth, keeping alive that divine spark of its own God consciousness, animating and integrating your physical, your animating and integrating the feeling realm, animating and keeping together the blessed mind, sustaining since your first incarnation the vehicles of the memory body. All of that as your God presence has poured forth its own individualization of those qualities of purity, of divine organization, of keeping things structured according to cosmic law. And all of that you can rub, you can be like Aladdin and rub the magic lamp of your heart flame and release the genius of your own Christ presence and mighty I am presence to step forth and to be there to produce the miracles of God perfection in your life. As you come to treasure divine order and purity, to love and value them as some of the most priceless and precious lilting qualities of your God consciousness, more and more and more they will fill your world and displace everything unlike themselves. Beloved, mighty I am presence in the heart of God, in the great central sun. O beloved Alpha and Omega, beloved nameless one, receive now the boundless gratitude of our hearts. Beloved great I am, that you have inspired the glorious Chohans of the Ray to serve with constancy, to serve with assuming the mantle of responsibility, to serve in selfless sacrifice, to themselves be obedient to the impersonal necessities of cosmic law, to wield the sword of the cosmic Christ command, the conscious cosmic Christ command, and to themselves bow and bend the knee before the one law of thy presence. Receive our gratitude for these 12 continuing to serve here in this world of form, for that priceless ministry which they perform on thy behalf, and on behalf of all of those divine sparks and Godhead charioteers, the life waves of the root races, seeking to unfold their own identity as God individualized here in this world. We thank you, we thank you, we thank you. Amen.